Calling this, with this disorderly crowd, please calm down. We are calling the meeting to order. We'll ask the clerk to announce the meeting and call the roll.
Roll call: Kane.
Here.
Markley.
Here.
Walters. Philbrook.
Here.
Walker. Townsend.
Present.
McKiernan.
Here.
Maddox.
Here.
Holland.
Here. All right. We are going to, I'm going to ask, I'm completely discombobulated here. I'm concerned tonight about security in the room because we only have police, it seems like, in the room tonight. Welcome, everyone. We're looking forward to recognizing your work. Sister, you're not Sister Therese.
No, I was surprised I got the call today. I didn't think I was supposed to be here, but I'm here. So,
All right.
Pastor Flannery.
Yes, Jean Flannery from La Misión de San Lucas. Bienvenidos. Please stand for the invocation and remain standing for the Pledge of Allegiance.
Gracias. I'll pray for our leaders and I'll pray for our police as well. So, gracias, Padre. Venimos a ti en esta tarde. Estamos agradecidos por esta oportunidad de estar en tu presencia. Pedimos sabiduría para nuestros líderes, que ellos puedan hacer leyes justos, que puedan proteger y cuidar a nuestros ciudadanos, Señor. Y pedimos también bendiciones sobre la policía que están aquí, que le bendicen a ellos en su trabajo tan importante que hacen por nuestra ciudad. So, gracias por todos y danos armonía. Y gracias en esta noche pedimos en el nombre del Padre, del Hijo, del Espíritu Santo, en el nombre de Jesús. Amén. So, God bless you all.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you, Reverend Flannery. I'd like to ask the clerk if there are any revisions to tonight's agenda.
No revisions.
All right, that brings us to item number 1, is a presentation of the Traffic Safety Award. And I'm going to turn it over to Mr. Bach for presentation.
Thank you, Mayor. Tonight we are pleased to have our officers in the room who are being recognized by the Kansas Department of Transportation for the AAA Award, which is for their superior efforts in addressing local safety traffic issues. And at this time, I'd like to recognize Robert Hamilton with KDOT to come forward and present the award.
Well, this was a lot nicer introduction than I got the other night. I'm retired law enforcement also, and a chief of police in an agency in Johnson County I won't mention introduced me, and then he looked at me and winked, and I knew I was in trouble. He said, "I want to introduce Bob Hamilton, but he's not the plumber." So, Mayor Holland and Board of Commissioners, I'd like to thank you for this opportunity to be here to address you this evening. We're going to be presenting the KCK PD Traffic Unit with their first AAA award. It's a gold award. And some things that they have done to gain this award is they've received points for having a community-based traffic safety committee that identifies traffic safety problems and formulates solutions, for having departmental policy regarding the use of their seatbelts, for assisting the United Government Health Department with the Safe Routes to Schools program. They provide directions and control during the walking school bus. They also are heavily involved with SAFE, which, if you're not familiar with that, is that Seatbelts for Everyone. That's a high school program that we have now in 52 counties and I believe 160 high schools across the state of Kansas. In education, they receive points for their child safety seat technician certification classes and the fitting station that they operate, and for Drive Wisely Wyandotte and Junior Police Academy programs. They receive points for their enforcement work in DUI, the Click It or Ticket It program, the You Drink, You Drive, You Lose, St. Patrick's Day, and Cinco de Mayo, and their joint venture with the Wyandotte County DA for prom and graduation DUI work. In engineering, they receive credit for assisting traffic safety engineering with traffic sign and speed bump placement in high traffic locations around the Speedway and Sporting KC complexes. They're also proficient in taking a data-driven approach to crime and traffic safety. Like I said earlier, they are receiving their first award. They're one of 23 agencies across the state of Kansas, so you have a police department to be very proud of. To prove their superior efforts for gaining this award, the adult seatbelt use is on the rise from 83% in 2012 to 86% in 2013. Teen belt use has risen steadily from 42% in 2009 to 78% in 2013. A lot of that has to do with the SAFE program, but a lot of it has to do with these gentlemen that are sitting here behind me with their traffic work. Child passenger seat use has also risen steadily from 75% in 2009 to 84% in 2013. Alcohol arrests are up from 496 to 566, but one good thing about that, alcohol crashes dropped from 203 to 172. Teen crashes were 330 in 2009, and in 2013, the most reported year, 270, so it's also on the downward trend. Most importantly, fatalities dropped in your city from 22 to 7. That's quite a substantial drop. So Mr. Holland and Commissioners, you are to be congratulated for your leadership and your support of the police department. So at this time, it gives me great pleasure to present the 2014 AAA Gold Award to Captain Angel of the Kansas City Police Department.
Thanks, guys. Thanks.
For those of you watching at home, we have 1 citizen and 3 armed police officers, so we are covered. All right. Continuing on with our item, the next item is simply adopting a couple changes to the meeting dates. We're required by law, when the new commissioners are seated, to adopt the new meeting schedule for the next 2 years. So we're on the tail end of this one, and so we have a couple of modifications. One is to cancel the March 19th meeting. I know that makes everyone sad when we cancel a meeting, but to cancel the March 19th, and then to set the April 23rd meeting as a regular session. That will be the night of the swearing in for the new commissioners, or for those of you who are, for all the new elected, there'll be 5 commissioners who will be sworn in at that April 23rd session. And then also for planning and zoning purposes, to set April 30th as the planning and zoning, which is our typical last Thursday of the month. We will need to formally reset the 30th on a vote on the 23rd, but for planning purposes, they need to know what meeting they're targeting. So they send notices out. So on the 23rd, we'll vote on the 30th again as part of the larger packet. But just in terms of getting us prepared for the next cycle, those are the dates that we're looking at. So if there's a motion to accept these.
To make the changes that were requested.
Second?
All right, any discussion? Roll call.
Roll call. Kane.
Aye.
Markley. Walters. Philbrook.
Aye.
Walker.
Aye.
Townsend.
Aye.
McKiernan.
Aye.
Murguia.
Aye.
Maddox. Commissioner Maddox, are you on the line? Okay. Okay. Motion carries 8-0.
Aye.
that an aye?
That's an aye.
All right, thank you, sir. Thank you for joining us.
The motion is 9-0.
All right. That brings us now to our consent agenda. There is one item on this. If anyone would like to set this one item aside and vote on it by itself, you're welcome to. Let the record show no one in attendance tonight is moving forward to set anything aside. It's properly moved and seconded. Roll call.
Roll call, Kane. Markley. Walters. Philbrook.
Aye.
Walker. Townsend.
Aye.
McKiernan.
Aye.
Murguia.
Aye.
Maddox.
Aye.
Motion carries 9-0.
All right. Administrator's agenda, Mr. Bach, the first item.
This item has been brought forth by a couple of citizens who have noted to us, and I think it's really just more of a sign of today's time that when we have individuals that want to speak, they come to the microphone, we require them to state their name and address for the record. Our administrative purpose for having the name and address for the record is that if there was something we needed to go back and contact someone for in the future, we have that address, we can look them up. In looking back, that's really something that we don't do. We really haven't had that need to do it. But the citizens have said, you know, they have to, since we're on TV, call out their address and tell everybody where they live. And there is some discomfort with that. Now, the flip side of that is during planning and zoning meetings, I think you often want to know how their house relates in proximity to a resident in question or business in question. And we would still need to account for that. But there's no policy in place that states that. It's just more of a procedure that we've used to say, state your name and record. So on a meeting like tonight, if someone wanted to come forward and talk about this issue, I think we'd tell what city you're from, and they could say they're from Kansas City, Kansas, or Bonner Springs, and that probably suffices to know if they're a resident of our community or not, in the event they're from Missouri or something like that. And then we may be more particular about it during a planning and zoning meeting to find their relevance to it. So unless there's an exception to it, it's one that I'm recommending to the mayor that we not require people to state their address anytime they come forward to the microphone. And unless there's a need for that, based on the particular item, that would be our procedure going forward.
All right. Do we need to approve it as a motion or?
No, it's not really it's just
not
a
a-
process, so I think it's more
not
of an
an ordinance.
acceptance unless there, the mayor said when I brought it to him, and as long as we felt that it was something in keeping with the commissioners, unless there was a big problem, we'd probably follow that process.
I just wanted to bring it forward to the whole commission because I thought if we made that's a significant change. It's part of our procedure, and I just wanted to get feedback from the commission in terms of how people felt, but it had never occurred to me until a couple people complained. Didn't complain, but they brought it to our attention after the last couple public hearings. I do want to know what city they live in. I think that matters in terms of the feedback that they're giving us. But in terms of the specific address, and maybe for planning and zoning, and I think, Mr. Bach, if you would work with Rob Richardson, maybe they could give the address to the staff so that the staff can vet the location of their property. But it might be relevant to the commission. The planning commission, sometimes that is relevant because the planning commission want to know exactly where do you live that you might have. So that might be a different issue, but we can play that by ear. But if there's no objection, before we just made that a policy, I wanted to run that by you all. Consensus there? Okay.
Mayor,
Yes. Commissioner Townsend.
thank you. I did have some concern about what was the initial purpose for disclosing speaker's address, and Mr. Bach, Administrator Bach, has talked about post-contact purposes, and that makes sense. But for the other concerns with respect to what the speaker may be talking about, whether it's planning and zoning or any other change in ordinance or proposed action, I think it is relevant and important to know, at least I feel as a commissioner it is, to know that that speaker is a resident of Wyandotte County or not. I think that should be stated minimally, and that for verification purposes, I could and would propose that the address could be given to the clerk. It doesn't have to be publicly stated, but I think that's important for any of us to know that when someone is making a public address, how they are going to be particularly impacted as either a resident of Wyandotte County or someone who's not a resident of Wyandotte County. So I would like to see some recording mechanism still maintained for identification purposes. It can change the optics of what people see and the relevance or importance of who's actually in the room at any given time in a public hearing and who the real residents are and who's going to be immediately impacted as to whether or not they're a resident and a voter in Wyandotte County.
I guess, and this is Doug, Commissioner, we'll work with the clerk's office to determine whether or not there's a way we could, maybe it's just a log, that somebody writes down their address when they come to the podium or something like that. So we'll see if there's something we can come up with that makes it something for a record in the event that we need to check with them, or just make sure they're noting where they are from in the city.
I think that would be important to have it maintained, and that in lieu of stating a specific address, they address publicly whether or not they are a resident of Wyandotte County, and then give that specific address for verification later if need be, or follow-up. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, if there's no more discussion, we'll move on to the next item, a legislative update. The legislatures are on break right now, right? They're back. All right, Mike Taylor, give us a brief update on issues that are affecting us.
Thank you very much, Mayor, Commission. What I want to do is hit a few highlights on some of the major issues and then open it up for questions you may have on other issues of interest that are out there. Probably one of the hottest issues going in right now, as we hit the second half, we kind of hit halftime over the weekend. They wrapped up the first half of the session on Thursday, and as that half of the session came to an end at about 11 o'clock on Thursday night, they passed the city elections bill in the Senate. And what that bill does, it's Senate Bill 171, what it would do is move city and school board elections to the fall of odd-numbered years. So instead of having a primary in March, as we just had, and a general election in April, you would have a primary in August and November of the odd-numbered years, which is the same year that city and school board elections occur. They would remain nonpartisan, which is an issue that we fought hard to keep, because we didn't believe that city and school board elections needed to be tagged as Republican or Democrat. I mean, filling potholes and building community centers or getting sidewalks built is not a Republican-Democrat issue. The Senate went along with that. One of the things that the bill would do, however, is any bond issues or sales tax elections would also have to be held in August or November of an odd-numbered year. You couldn't have a special election in April or June, as we've done in the past. It would have to be done during the fall elections. That bill is now moving over to the House, and there are hearings next week on that bill, and the chairman of the House Elections Committee has a bit of a different idea. What he would really like to see is city and school board elections held in even-numbered years on the same ballot as you would vote for president, governor, Senate, legislative races. One of the concerns we've expressed about that is that by the time you have a huge ballot, and think back to November when we had a very contested governor's race, a very heated Senate race, legislative races, by the time you get down to the bottom of that ballot, school board District 3 is probably not going to get a lot of attention. So what the chairman of the House Committee is proposing is that on those ballots, if they would make those changes, all the city and school board races would have to be at the top of the ballot. And then governor, president, Senate would fall down later. We're not sure that that's going to go. I think we could probably live with moving them to the fall of the odd-numbered years. One of the concerns that city clerks and election commissioners have is if you move those elections to that huge ballot in an even-numbered year where you have maybe a presidential race, a Senate race, a gubernatorial race, city council races, the ballot is so long that the machines may not technically be able to handle them. So it's still a very hot issue. It's one that's will be heard next week, and that's a major issue that cities all over the state are looking at. Another big issue for us is the abandoned housing.
Can I say something about
Yes,
that too? If
sir.
it moves to the fall, it doubles the length of time between the primary and the general. Because right now we have 5 weeks between the primary and the general.
Yes.
And this would extend it to 10 or 12 weeks from August all the way to November.
That's right.
So that's a significantly longer campaign season for everyone.
That's true. One of the other concerns about that in terms of campaigning is the concern in the fall of a year, if you've got a major election race and all the fundraising that goes on for a campaign, the dollars may be all sucked up by those major races, and that leaves very little money to be raised by a school board candidate or a city council candidate or a UG commission candidate. That's one of the things that was concerned. And interestingly, even the Kansas Association of Broadcasters came in and said, you know, there's only so much airtime on TV, and if you put all of these races in the same election cycle, we may run out of minutes to actually sell campaign ads, because you know what it's like during a campaign season, during a major election. I mean, the ads are everywhere. Well, there's only so many minutes on TV during a programming day. So they even came in and said, that's another issue to think about. So all of those things are being discussed, but there seems to be a real drive, and the concern seems to be that municipal elections have such low voter turnout, and the feeling is by many that moving into the fall would increase that voter turnout. But we've also seen statistics that show that the longer the ballot, there's a major drop-off as you get toward the bottom of the ballot. People just get tired, and they vote for the major races, and then like, yeah, I'm not going to vote for the rest of those. So it's all being debated. It's a very hot issue right now in the State House, and we'll know more. Next Wednesday is the hearing in the House side. It passed the Senate. The biggest thing for us was not making them partisan, and we've managed to survive that at this point. I think we can continue that even if they move them to the even-numbered years. Next issue that we've really talked about and worked for years on is abandoned housing. This is an issue that Representative Stan Fraunfelter and the UG have worked on for a number of years, and it's a way to expedite dealing with abandoned housing and try to get that housing turned over to an agency that can rehabilitate it, get it back on the market, and keep it from being just boarded up and eventually demolished. Late in the day on Thursday, we had worked a compromise with the bankers, with a number of other groups, and we thought we had a bill that everybody could support. And a group out of Wichita primarily, Americans for Prosperity, and a county commissioner down there, started raising ruckus about it regarding property rights and that kind of thing. And some of the Senate leadership got some cold feet. They didn't run the bill, which technically, under legislative rules, means that it died at the turnaround. Well, we had as a backup introduced a mirror bill in the House side, which had not really moved because we were trying to work it through the Senate. Representative Fraunfelter was able to go to the Speaker, get that bill blessed, which means it stays alive, and we think we're going to get some hearings on the House side now to try to keep the bill alive. So it was a defeat, clearly, but we managed to put in position a way to keep the bill alive, so we still have some hope we might be able to get it to move through yet this session. Guns. There's a hearing next week. The Senate passed this easily, but Senate Bill 45 would allow, it's called constitutional carry. It would allow anyone and everyone to conceal carry without having to get a permit, a background check, or have any training. That bill easily passed the Senate, and now it's moving into the House side. I didn't testify on that bill. We knew that it was going to pass, and so we didn't weigh in. A bill that I did testify on is Senate Bill 65, which really supersedes our policies here at the UG and every city. So we have a policy in our personnel manual that says if you're on the clock working for the UG, unless you're authorized to carry a gun, like the chief, if you're any other employee, and even if you have a concealed carry permit, we don't want you carrying that gun while you're on the clock working for us. This law would be the state legislature superseding that policy and telling us that no, if they have a concealed carry permit, you as the employer cannot tell them they can't carry their gun when they're at work. We obviously testified and opposed that bill, and I just have to comment that it's interesting to me, and I say this in testimony all the time, so I have no problem saying it here, that many of these legislators rail against the federal government on whether it's health care or environmental laws or something they try to impose on the state, and then they turn around and do the very same thing to cities and counties. And I point that out to them frequently, how hypocritical that is, and that there is such a thing as local control. In fact, there's constitutional home rule in Kansas that lets us make those kind of decisions. But for them to reach into our personnel policies and tell us that we can't tell our own employees in a workplace how they need to perform, I think is just egregious, and I said that to the legislative committee. The bill hasn't moved yet, but I expect it may before
But
the
if they
session's
do
over.
away with concealed carry permits, then presumably anybody can carry a gun anywhere, anytime.
That's correct.
So even any employee, we just take the metal detectors down at the city hall?
Well, as you know, we got an exemption for 4 years under the bill that passed last year. So in 3 years, unless we either decide, and this building and the courthouse are covered, but many of our other buildings, we got the exemption. So we do, as a local governing body, have a decision to make in the next 3 years what we're going to do about either Davis Hall, community centers. We either have to put in security guards and metal detectors, or we will have to allow guns in those buildings. So that's a decision that is coming in the next couple of years for all of you.
Okay.
But there's open carry now as well, and the argument from the proponents of this is, well, we passed a law that allows people to just openly carry a gun without having to have a permit, so why not conceal carry? And the point that I've made to the committee is regarding the training, you know, whether I've got a gun openly that's showing or I've got it hidden in my jacket, once I draw that gun, I have a gun in my hand. Shouldn't I have some kind of training on how to use that gun? I can't drive a car without taking a test that shows I know how to operate that vehicle. Should I not have to take some kind of a test to handle a gun?
All right.
So that's the gun issue. I'll wrap up quickly here. A couple of other things I just want to hit quickly, and then I want to allow time for questions for other issues that you may be interested in. We brought a bill last year. The legislature, in kind of a sly move late in the session, cut the interest rate that they charge on delinquent tax payments. We brought a bill back this year that said, you know, that just is an incentive to not pay your taxes on time. And so we've introduced a bill. We had a hearing in the House Tax Committee. They're going to work it on Tuesday that would raise that rate by 5%. It's set by federal statute, the base rate. So what our proposal would do, the base rate right now set by the feds is 4%. This would add 5% to it. So it would make the interest rate on a delinquent tax payment at 9%. And we think that's not unreasonable. It's getting a little bit of resistance from some of the members of the legislature, but I'm optimistic that we can work it between now and Tuesday and maybe get that bill passed. One other thing I'll mention to you, because you all have authorized me to work with the Coalition on Immigration Reform, there's a bill regarding in-state tuition. You know, for the past number of years, since I think 2004, immigrants who were brought here as children or raised here, went through our public schools, even though they're here illegally, still get in-state tuition at our community colleges and Regents universities. There's a measure to do away with that. That bill also then becomes a vehicle, or a Christmas tree sometimes as it's called, where you just hang all kinds of things on it, opening it up to all kinds of other anti-immigration measures. And that bill is going to be talked about on Monday in the State House, and we're looking at possibilities of measures that we've opposed in the past that would require us to do E-Verify on all of our city employees, something that HR really opposes because of the cumbersomeness of it. It could also require police to do a number of things in terms of vehicle stops. It could crowd our jails in terms of holds. So we're opposing that. I'm working it behind the scenes with a number of other folks, but we'll see where that goes. So I wanted to alert you to that because it could blow up as a big issue. I want to touch on a couple of things in terms of taxes. You know, there's a $600 million hole in the budget. That's just for this year, and the year ends June 30th. So between now and June 30th, they have to find $600 million. There are a number of bills that have been introduced, not yet heard, that would raise taxes in various areas. Instead of just admitting, a little bit of a political statement, admitting they made a mistake by the big income tax cuts that they made, they're looking at other ways to raise revenue. And some of those, many of those, would affect our residents. One of the bills would add state sales tax on top of residential utilities. So a bill from Westar, a bill from the BPU, would add 5.3% state sales tax on top of those utilities. Major hit to the everyday consumer in Kansas. Another one that's been talked about but not yet out is putting a state surcharge on the transient guest tax, otherwise known as the bed tax or the hotel tax. You know, we get that money that we add on, and it goes to convention and tourism kind of promotional things. Well, imagine adding another 5.3% on top of that. And I was talking to someone from Overland Park today, and in their case, by the time you have the city sales tax, their transient guest tax, and then you add that surcharge, if you stay in a hotel in Overland Park, you're going to pay almost 20% on top of the hotel bill. Now, being as close to the state line as we are, you know, I would think maybe, depending on the hotel you're staying in, I'm going to hop over to the Missouri side and stay in their hotel and just drive back across the state line. So that's one that we're concerned about. Another one is, you know, on the property tax you pay, the first 20 mills goes to the state to pay for schools. That mill levy is not applied to the first $20,000 of value in your home. There's a bill introduced that would take that exemption away, so it would increase your property taxes because that $20,000 exemption would be gone. So those 20 mills, excuse me, would cover every dollar of your home's value instead of not exempting the first 20,000. And there's several other issues. One would tax passive income, like things from if you happen to own, you know, an oil lease or get royalties or that kind of thing. So they're looking at a number of ways to try to. It really is like going to the couch and looking under the cushions for nickels and dimes to try to fill a $600 million hole. But those are ones that I'm particularly watching because they would affect every resident that lives here. The other quick thing as I finish up, the mutual aid bill, the bill that we talked about for law enforcement that would allow our officers to cross over into Missouri and vice versa on a critical incident, a terrorist attack or a major disaster. Missouri passed that law last year, and we got that passed today out of the House Federal and State Affairs Committee. It's moving, and I think that bill may actually go. And what that really does is that allows our officers, if they're called, to cross over into Missouri for an incident and vice versa, and have the liability protections that they need and that kind of thing in case there is an incident. And one of the examples I use in that, just to kind of let you know what I'm talking about, is several years ago, if you remember, there was an active shooter at the Ward Parkway Mall. The first two officers to respond to that were from Leawood, Kansas, but because they were in another jurisdiction, in another state, they really had no authority to do anything. And luckily, Kansas City, Missouri police officers arrived and were able to deal with the situation. This would eliminate that kind of a problem and give our officers that authority. So we got that bill passed out today. And now what I'd like to do is just open up for any questions that you may have on any other issue.
I was thinking for calling for a moment of silence, but is there any other?
We may need a prayer. That may be appropriate.
I don't know if Reverend Flannery covered all this in his prayer, but any other questions for Mr. Taylor? The halfway mark?
Hard to top all that good news.
It's hard to top all that good news. That is correct. All right. Well, we appreciate your work in the trenches for us, and we appreciate the work of the Wyandotte County delegation, our representatives and senators who are working hard on behalf of Wyandotte County every day. So thank you very much, and we appreciate it.
Thank you.
All right, that concludes our agenda. We are adjourned.